the war in Gaza entering now its third month.
Fox 5 political analyst Rick Epps is joining us now with the latest. Rick, good morning.
Good morning, both of you.
The question, obviously, what has happened since the ceasefire ended, but I think we know things have escalated and more things are planned.
Yeah, unfortunately, since last Friday, we've seen about half of the amount of fuel that was once getting in is getting into the region, which is tremendously problematic in terms of infrastructure. Over 16,000 people have been killed. About 140 hostages still remain, and it's interesting when you think about how they were telling people to go south, and then they start bombing in the south, and so there's no place that's safe for anyone at this point. So it's incredibly messy. And I, last week when I was on, I talked about that. I was concerned about what would happen, like when the ceasefire started. I think what people assumed was that it was going to be that maybe it would continue day by day, which it did for a few days. People were kind of hopeful, but with Netanyahu openly stating that, we're not going to stop until Hamas is gone. Well, there was no way it was going to stay, but then the next action is even more punitive than the previous actions. No.
You say Hamas is gone, and I think you and I have had multiple conversations about this particular point. Can that ever be achieved, though?
I mean, not in any real sense. I mean, you can certainly minimize them and to some regard and push them out of the area. But like with most of these groups, whether it's the Islamic Jihad or the other groups, they kind of go with the tide, right? They rise, they fall, they rise, and they fall. And so is there any real way to eradicate them completely? No, because ideology is built around around a certain belief system. And so they can perpetuate that anytime they want. And with 16,000 people that have been killed, for whatever, however anybody wants to look at that there will be new militants as a result of that. So,
explain how complicated it is, because some folks within Israel are asking Netanyahu to step down, saying this is too much. You got to get the hostages out, and then you can do what you're doing now, but you're still putting our family members at risk. The IDF bombing in South Gaza, what is the intent there now for Netanyahu, despite the call for him to resign within his own country? What's the strategy? Because a lot of people say, well, it's all political with Netanyahu. This seems like way beyond that, but what are your thoughts on how he's approaching it?
Yeah. Well, as a leader, in his situation and understanding his sort of psychology, right, his behavioral patterns, I think it's a combination of both. I think it's one, he tries to show the Israeli people that he's going to do whatever he can to protect them, right? That's always a very good political ploy for leaders when they're in the hot water that he's in. And you're right, he's under significant hot water because of the fact that those hostages, Israeli hostages, are still residing inside of Gaza. And the truth is, we don't know if they're alive. That's the first problem, right? Because if they're not, or if some of them aren't, then that's a major problem. The other part of the reality or the equation of this is, okay, if they are alive, and he's talking, like for example, they're talking about flooding the tunnels now. So if they flood the tunnels, what if the Israeli hostages are in the tunnels? And then, in other words, he tries to justify the action of Israeli citizens being, sort of sacrificed, if you will, in order to achieve the greater aim of getting rid of Hamas. The people, the citizens who are family members are incredible. He's got a lot of heat on him right now. And he already had heat previously, so now it's been extra heaped on him. If he continues to play this political game with the military and these incursions and causing further death, with the Israeli people going, okay, enough is enough, because they're concerned too, right? Because you think about, well, who's going to pay the consequence if more militants come up, or they more terrorist attacks? The Israeli public. So there comes a point where you have to decide what it is you in fact plan to do, and you got to have an endpoint. And right now there is no endpoint.
There is no endpoint.
You talk about who pays for all these in these games, if you want to call them, of politics and the humanitarian crisis. I mean, we've been saying this for months now. We keep saying it's reached a critical point. It's reached a critical point. We're now 3 months in. I mean, could it get worse? I mean, it can get worse than this, but this is already bad.
Well, the humanitarian crisis, I think, is the greatest concern. And here's the next part of that I think people don't think about is sanitation. The lack of sanitation in that area right now because of the displaced people, potential rise of disease. And then when that happens, thousands could die just from disease because they don't have medical supplies, they don't have food, they have very little food, very little water, and very little fuel. So with all those things in play, what do you do with that scenario? Because now people are going to die, and you can say, well, we didn't have anything to do with it because they just died because of disease, but it's a war of attrition, and this is what happens. And so it serves their interest to have that happen on Netanyahu's logic path.
Yeah, some of the towns in the north uninhabitable.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, just literally wiped off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
Let's talk foreign policy for a minute. For both Israel and for the U.S.'s involvement, seems like it's pretty much of a nightmare at this point in terms of foreign policy, how the world is viewing what the U.S. is doing and what Israel is doing. How do they kind of approach that?
Yeah, it's messy for the United States. Let's start there for a moment because they think Biden's numbers are slightly increasing because of the push toward trying to get more aid to Israel. I think it's a long range, it's a really dangerous game. But as long as this goes on, I think it hurts them more than it helps them. But the foreign policy part for the United States is one, if you're backing a government that looks more and more like a pariah, not the people in Israel, but the government of Israel looks like, because everybody's saying stop, 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 and they're going no, no, no. And then when that happens, then people in the world start turning against you, even if the original action may have been justified in terms of response. But I think people are really trying to get to a point of saying, look, you can approach this another way that could be more strategic instead of just rampant bombing of innocents, just to get one bad guy that you will try to kill 100 good guys, right? And I think that's part of the problem. On the Israeli side, it's a serious nightmare because their allies, their Western allies, are slowly but surely abandoning them. And it may be really difficult to rebuild those relationships in the long run. It's going to be a very long time for those, because he has severely damaged those relationships. So the next leader, if in fact Netanyahu ends up getting ousted or some sort, is going to have a very long road to try to clean up the mess.
You talk about long time. It's being reported that they're expecting, U.S. officials are expecting this fighting in Gaza to go until 2024, into the beginning of the year?
Yeah, I see it going further than that. I think the last estimate I saw was around January. And with that, I think that that may be a little bit naive. I really think it's going to go longer than that. Wow. Will there be moments of de-escalation? Yes, but I would argue that the reality in this situation is if Netanyahu stays in power and even with the U.S. pressuring them, I really don't see them, he won't stop until he continues to control that area. I still believe that he wants to control Gaza, that he really wants, he wants the Gaza Strip. And for lots of reasons that resources that are under Gaza there, I mean, there's oil and natural gases and things that are part of the political part of this. But I also think that his long-term aim is that, and particularly with, with a lot of pressure. Let me just digress for a moment regarding, the invocation of Article 99.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. A lot of people don't know it's fairly new.
Yeah.
It's fairly new, and it's been invoked. To explain what that means around the world. Yeah,
well, Article 99 is a UN charter that's rarely used by the UN Secretary General, that allows the Secretary General to unilaterally, or on his own, or her own, call the UN Security Council into action, into meeting, and to be able to say, look, we've got a humanitarian crisis that you have to deal with. Yeah. Because for most people who may not realize, the UN Security Council has been very, very lax on getting a resolution done. So they're for a ceasefire. So since that hasn't happened, because of the humanitarian crisis, this gives the UN Secretary General Guterres the ability to be able to invoke this rarely, and I mean rarely used, UN charter. And so that's why we sit, because of the humanitarian crisis. Yeah.
We'll be speaking again, I'm sure. Rick Epps, thanks for the expertise as always.
Thank you, good to see you. All right.